All right, it is my absolute honor to welcome Terry Cole to the Unlock the Sugar Shackles podcast. Welcome, Terry.
Well, thanks for having me, Danielle.
I'm so excited to have you today because you are one of the people whose content I consume the most and whose content actually changed so much of my life. And while not directly in relating to nutrition, the work that you do is so helpful for having a healthy lifestyle, healthy relationships, and just being a healthy person overall. So I would love to hear a little bit more about you and your story and how you came to find this love of boundaries.
Well, I think, a lot of times they say you teach what you most need to learn. So I would say I was a total boundary disaster for a long time. A real people pleaser. I'm an empath and a highly sensitive person. So all of those things contributed to me sort of overfunctioning, overgiving, overfeeling. And I became resentful, but I didn't understand until I was in therapy for a long time what was causing my annoyance. Like, it was coming out in my relationships where I felt like people are taking advantage of me. People are entitled. No matter what I do, it's not enough, was sort of the feeling that I had. Always looking out, though, at the other people. And of course, therapy made me self-reflect and go, why are you serving yourself up on a platter? Why are you not being honest? Why are you letting what other people want? Even people that are not even important to you. When you're a people pleaser, you're like indiscriminate. You want everyone to like you, like not even important people. And so through the process of getting healthy around my own boundaries and understanding it, I changed careers. I was a talent agent, negotiating contracts for supermodels and celebrities for almost a decade. But that was during my 20s when I was really super transforming myself, my own personal evolution psychologically, right? Really got into self-help. And then I found myself in a business that I was like, oh, this is like a shit show. Like, I have to get out of here. It is so unhealthy. And I found that in the end of the last probably 2 years of my career, I was way more interested in the mental health of my clients than I was whether they got the Pantene deal or whether I negotiated a movie contract for them. So that's when I knew. I was like, you got to get out of here before you start really sucking at what you're supposed to be great at. And even though no one really understood, because I was really kind of at the height of my career, I was running the New York, the East Coast office of a bi-coastal talent agency, representing elite models, Ford models. It was like like Naomi Campbell was my client, So nobody really got like why I would be going to grad school in my early 30s, getting in debt. My father was literally like, when I told him I was quitting my fancy job, he was like, sounds weird. I was like, good thing I don't need anything from you, buddy. But
Yeah.
I was like, how about just support me? I said, Dad, here's the thing. I'm not happy. And that really matters to me. And I also knew, I was like, dude, there has got to be something more meaningful that I could be doing with my one and only life than making supermodels richer. And I got nothing against supermodels. They're lovely. Like, it's not that. It's just that I was like, I can be of service in such a greater way. And so that's sort of what led me to become a psychotherapist. Then once I was in the trenches with my clients, and I feel like as a therapist, you have a tendency to attract people who resonate with your own story, with your own deal. And so I had a lot of very highly capable, high-functioning women, ballers, in my practice. But what I saw was an epidemic of disordered boundaries. And it was the same thing, like where they weren't making the connection the same way I wasn't making the connection. And I just realized that it didn't matter what their presenting problem was, right? They could come in talking about work or their marriage or their family of origin or their friends or drinking or whatever. But I could always sort of connect the dots backwards to this lack of this crucial skill set. And so I just decided that I was going to write this. I really wanted to write the seminal text, the text that in writing Boundary Boss, you could be like, this is the one book. If you are earnest, if you mean it, if you want to learn, this is all you need. I will teach you in this book. And I did. And so we have, I've hundreds of zillions of people around the world at this point that we've impacted with helping people become literate around boundaries. And, I really think, Danielle, like my clients would feel bad about themselves, like, what's wrong with me? Am I just a pushover? Am I just a people pleaser? And I'm like, dude, why would you think it's like expecting to be fluent in a language that literally nobody ever taught you. There's no reason to feel bad. Just get committed that you're going to learn.
Yeah. I love hearing your story because I think so many people can relate with this storytelling. And it's interesting. I know that I was reading something that you wrote. Listened to Boundary Boss on Audible like 3 times already. But I was reading something you wrote about and hearing what you're saying about just being so called to be of service, to help people with what you need help with and your lived experience and how that can help people so much. I found myself struggling in my speech therapy job, telling the parents to, change their kids' diets, and we were getting so much more progress than we could ever have gotten in just regular speech therapy. I felt stifled, like my message needed to get out there, and I feel so honored to be able to be of service and provide this free content to people because, the people who are needing it, it's really resonating with them, and just the people who are finding it is so awesome. And so I care about my listeners so much, and I'm so thankful to have you here to talk about this topic of boundaries that I think it's really overlooked because, like you said, we didn't learn this language growing up. I did not know what a boundary was. I was trained to be the good girl and to always, make other people feel comfortable and all these things. And that apparently, I've learned, leads to a lot of disordered boundaries. So to start from the top, can you just tell us what is a boundary and what are the purpose of boundaries?
Okay. So this is the way that I describe it because it's easiest to understand, is I want you to think about your boundaries as your own personal rules of engagement. This lets other people know what's okay with you and what's not okay with you. Your boundaries, according to me, because I broke it down, because there was no good description where I could understand what the hell it was. So I was like, what is it actually? It's you knowing your preferences, your desires, your limits, and your deal breakers, which are your non-negotiables in relationships, career, anything. And it's not enough to just know them. You got to know them and then have the ability to transparently communicate them. And I feel like this is what both of those things really screw people up, because a lot of times my therapy clients, I would be like, so what is your preference, or what brings you joy, or whatever the question is, and they would literally go, I don't know. I never really thought about it, because when we'll get into this later, but high functioning codependents, which is what I figured out my clients were, because that's what I was, we're so dialed into the wants, the desires, the thoughts, the feelings, the needs of other people, that shit is a full-time job, where who has time to self-reflect and be like, how do I actually feel? So much of the time my clients were like, I just don't want any drama. Like, I just don't want a conflict. I don't want to make a big deal out of nothing. Like all of these ways that we would self-abandon to avoid setting boundaries. But part of it is because nobody knows the language. You don't actually know how to do it. You feel like by the time you get to wanting to set a boundary, because most of the time we don't do it. We just make a mental note. Oh yeah, Bob in accounting, he's a jerk. Okay, I'm making a note of all the violations or all the inappropriate comments or whatever the thing is. And then just one day you like lose it on Bob because you waited too long. And so much of my teaching is early and often. We need to be sharing our preferences and understand that it doesn't mean people will always, right, acquiesce to what we want. But this is how we let other people know who we are, because your preferences, desires, limits, and deal breakers are not just your boundaries. They're literally the things that make you, Danielle, uniquely you. And so a lot of times we've been trained, and I'm going to talk a little bit about downloaded boundary blueprints and how we get them, but most of us were raised and praised for being self-abandoning codependents. And we're real coachable, right? So we learned it well. We're like, oh, like exactly what you said before. Make sure other people are comfortable. be nice. I mean, how many of you guys listening or watching heard, be a good girl, be a good boy, right? Where's my happy girl? Turn that frown around. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Like, if we think about childhood messaging, we were taught the opposite of asserting our authentic feelings if our authentic feelings someone else won't like. And so how much can you take one for the team? How much can you stuff crap down? Because I've seen it. I mean, I've seen people doing it for decades and coming into my therapy office with autoimmune disorders, insomnia, TMJ, like all the things. Because there's only so much you can self-abandon until your body starts breaking down from the stress, from the resentment, from the anxiety, from the fear, and all of those things. So let's go back to your downloaded boundary blueprint, my downloaded boundary blueprint, everybody listening, boundary blueprint. This is in your unconscious mind. And it's sort of, I want you to think about it like the blueprint for a house that someone else designed. So it's the way that we don't question, right? If you were raised in a family and if you had a maternal impactor, I call them, it could be a mom or an auntie, whoever raised you, who was a people pleaser. You saw all this modeled behavior that tells you being a good woman means that people are pleased with you, with what you're doing. You're always willing to help. You're always willing to be part of the solution. You pick up the slack for others. You do anything, though, to avoid conflict. So it shouldn't be like a surprise to anyone. If we just start to ask some questions, we go, oh, it makes sense that this is what I think. Because we have downloaded blueprints around everything, around money, around love, around family, around ambition, all the things. But with boundaries, it has everything to do with where you were raised, what country, what culture, your family systems, your family of origin had their own. Every family has their own norms of like the way we behave, the things we think are right or wrong. A lot of families have a group think that if you think differently than the family, you will be punished, you will be excommunicated, you will be ridiculed, or whatever it is. It also has to do with your role in the family system. Some people are the scapegoats, some people are the hero children, some people are the invisible ones. All of that stuff comes together, sort of coalesces, and that becomes your belief system around boundaries and asserting yourself and communicating honestly. And so part of the process of becoming more fluent in the language of boundaries is understanding why you relate to boundaries the way that you do. So there's definitely no one size fits all, right? Because some people, so if we look at how boundaries can be disordered, if you have boundaries that are too porous, that's more of the people pleaser, the peacekeeper, the chameleon, let's say. And if you have boundaries that are too rigid, that's more of the loner, that's more of the ice queen, where you'd be more likely, if you have rigid boundaries, you'd be more likely to cut someone off completely than you would to tell them how they hurt your feelings. So people have this misunderstanding around what it means to be a boundary boss, because the preconceived myth is that if you have good boundaries, you're bitchy, you're controlling, you're mean, you're rejecting people left and right, you're punching people in the face verbally, all the things, which of course is not true. That's someone with rigid boundaries, which is just as disordered as someone whose boundaries are too loose. So if people want to actually, I have a free quiz, which I don't know, Danielle, if you've taken it, but it's just at boundaryquiz.com, where people can actually it's 13 questions, and this will lead you to understanding what is your archetype, basically, of boundary setting right now. Like, where are you at this moment in time? Because you need to know where you are to figure out where you need to go.
Exactly. No, I have not taken that quiz, but I know that my boundaries are definitely too loose. I feel like I'm relating to so much of what you're saying, and I love how people are starting to connect by listening that okay, disordered boundaries are showing up in my life in all these ways, but it's not so overt. It's more like, oh, I'm showing up in, there's resentments, there's health issues, there's other things that are sort of unraveling in my life where you're not necessarily living this life that feels aligned and that you feel excited about. And so that can be this indicator that we're missing boundaries. One of the things that you said earlier was about that people pleasing, right? And so one of the things that I recognize in myself is that it's really hard for me to say no in certain senses. And I know you talk about the automatic yes. So there was the other day, my wife asked me if she could have some of my yogurt. And I really like this yogurt. It's very special to me. And when she asked me, I had to think about it because I'm trying not to do this automatic yes, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking about it and I'm just like, she wants to put it in her smoothie. She's not even going to enjoy it. I'm like, but I can go get some tomorrow. I can just ask her to get me more. And so I ended up just being like, you don't, like, it's really selfish. You can share, like, it's not a big deal. So I sort of coach myself out of my answer. And then I was like, okay. And she's like, I can tell you don't want me to have it, and that's okay. I'm like, it's okay. And she's like, yes, it's okay. You can say no. I'm like, I can. And I started crying over stupid yogurt. And I was like, this is how ingrained it is in me to not let someone down. And it was just such this crazy, silly story. But I felt like it was so representative of how hard it is sometimes for us to say no. And so if we have this difficulty saying no, what are we saying yes to in our life? And, you know, to wind in the nutrition piece of this, keeping sugar out of our life, not doing what everyone else is doing, how many times are we saying yes when we don't mean to? So can you talk about this automatic yes? And I know you have a lot to say.
I do, but I want to go back to the story with your wife because I think it's a beautiful illustration. And it's actually not a silly story. The reason you cried is because your wife saw you accurately and loved and accepted you anyway. She respected your no, even though you almost didn't deliver it. Like you didn't deliver it, but she knows you well enough to know that there was hesitation. And this is the deepening of intimacy that happens when we're honest. Instead of your wife judging you as being like, why are you greedy? Why are you selfish? Blah, blah, blah. She could have said all those things to you that you said to yourself because you were kind of talking yourself out of your no. But she didn't because she loves you. And so I'm not surprised you cried because that's meaningful to be seen. And this is what it feels like when we assert our boundaries and we let the people in our lives know how we really feel. It feels so good to be seen accurately, like actually who you are, and allowing yourself to just go, hey, this is my special stash. I really actually don't want to share it. Next time I go, if you want me to get double the amount because suddenly you love it too, that's okay. And then you'll have yours on that side of the fridge and I'll have mine and it all works out. So let's talk about the difficulty in saying no. And I'm going to give everyone a little bit of homework. So for the next 7 days, you are not to give an automatic yes to anything. For the next 7 days, and I'm going to give you some language and some scripts that you can use, you're going to give yourself the gift of expansion, time. Allow yourself to think. Nobody needs an immediate answer from you. And if someone pressures you because they're so used to you doing it, realize that if the house is not on fire, and if we're not talking about a minor child, right? We're talking about adult relationships. You've trained them. And so through this process of becoming a boundary boss, you will retrain them to expect something different, and you can do it absolutely lovingly. So let's just say you find yourself in a situation and someone asks you to do something on Saturday night. Sometimes immediately we know we don't want to do that thing. Not on Saturday night, not ever. Like we don't want to do it. And if it's people that are more, let's say, acquaintances than friends, I don't feel compelled to provide context, right? But what the first step for people listening is you're going to buy time. You're going to say, oh my gosh, thank you so much for thinking of me. I need to check with my wife. I need to check with my partner. I need to check with whomever. I'll get back to you by Thursday. Does that work? Now, what is happening is that when you don't give an immediate yes, especially when you want to say no, and if it's too confronting, if you've been a yes person, it's really confronting to suddenly like flip that script and be like, now I'm just going to say no to all the things. This is a happy medium, and you're training other people, but you're also training yourself to be like, this is my right to have time to think. And if the person says, okay, fine, so let me know on Thursday, it's so much easier to go back and say no if you haven't given an auto yes. Because with the auto yes, what ends up happening a lot of times, and we know this because we know the people pleasers in our life. When I was younger, if I said yes to some shit I did not want to do like so badly, I would suddenly get a migraine the morning of, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I can't make it because I'm sick, whether I was sick or not. Like, forcing myself to do the thing I didn't want to do sometimes was just impossible. So people recognize you as someone who makes commitments that you don't keep. You know, and I have friends who I love very much, but if they're a people pleaser and they say, oh yeah, I'm totally coming that weekend, my husband will say, oh, who was that? So-and-so? Oh yeah, so it's like a 50% chance she's going to be there. I'm like, probably 48, yeah. We know you, we see you. And the part in that we have to really get dialed into is that if you're someone who says yes when you want to say no, but then you sometimes bail, you're not emotionally trustworthy. You're really not. And the people I'm closest to in my life are the people who will tell me their truth, not the truth about me. I don't need a friend who's like, wow, I hate your haircut. Like, that's not the truth. That's just people being mean, right? If I ask you your opinion and you liked the other one better, you can lovingly tell me that. But do you know what I mean? How some people use truth as like a big stick to beat you in the face with? That's not the kind of truth I'm talking about. I'm talking about your truth. So let's just say my friend is doing a stand-up show in some place and she asked me to go. And I have a big presentation the next day at work. And I know I really can't go, even though I love this friend and I really want to support them. I can't do it. I say, I really wish I could be there. I'll be there in spirit. Maybe I'll even send her flowers the day of or something if it's a big deal. And I'll give context, which is I have a big presentation that I'll be prepping for. And there's just no way I can't do both. We hope the friend understands. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, maybe they're mad, and all of that is okay. Because here's the thing. When you set a boundary, when you assert what you need, the truth of your preference, desires, limits, and deal breakers, once it's sent, what the other person does is on their side of the street. The way they receive, what they make it mean, that's on their side of the street. We can only control our own. And your healing comes from asserting yourself, not what the other person does. Because this is where our self-esteem is built. So let's say, so now we're doing 7 days of no insta-guessing. We're going to buy time by saying, I need to check with this person. I'm not sure if someone asks you to take work, let's say it's a work thing, and they're like, can you take this part of this project for me? You say, I actually need to look at what's on my plate right now, so I'll let you know later today. I'm not sure if I have the bandwidth for it, but I'll let you know. Instead of saying yes that you're going to regret. And then when you come back, if it's someone that you care about and you love, we can always start with sweetness, right? We can always start by saying, thank you so much for thinking of me. I love that you always include me. It just makes me feel so loved. Thank you. And I can't do Wednesday, but I hope you guys have a great time. You don't have to write a dissertation, and you shouldn't, on your no, because what ends up happening is that when we start trying to convince, and this is the difference between providing context, which is a way for people to understand you more deeply, and convincing, which is asking them to give you permission for your no. And a lot of people are sort of emotionally predators, where the moment they notice that you're like, is that okay? Are you good with that? Is that, yeah? They're like, well, I don't know. I'll think about it. Like, the moment they see the weakness sort of, or the fear, some people, and I'm not saying your closest friends, I mean, maybe, but it's almost like you're giving them a signal that you're not okay with your boundary by being like, please be okay with my boundary to them. So I love the idea of saying, actually, we can't make it, but we hope you guys have a great time. If someone says, why? Why can't you make it? We actually have other plans. I didn't realize my partner just told me that we were already committed. Well, what are you doing? Like, listen, if someone is doing that, and if they're close to me, fine. If they're not, like, mind your mother effing business. You know, like, what I'm doing, you know, all that matters to you, pal, is I can't make it. And some people will try to wear away your boundary. They'll try to, just keep asking until you say yes. I mean, kids, of course, we know do this, but some adults will do it too. Like, I really want you there. It's not going to be the same. And if it gets to that point, if there's multiple conversations, I'll just say, hey, I gave you my answer. I expect you to respect it, just like I respect yours. You know, a lot of times I use humor with people. I try to keep it a little light. But I also, I mean, at this point in my life, obviously, don't let anybody push me around because I don't need to. And if I do, right, think about when we don't set boundaries in relationships where we feel resentful of people who are kind of entitled and they want more from us than we want to give them. When we do that, we are colluding with the lowest in them. It's not good for anyone. It's bad for the relationship and it's bad for you and it's not great for them, but that's not the why, right? Because that's their side of the street. But when you really think about it, it's almost like being in a relationship with someone who's, let's say, verbally abusive. If you stay and allow them to continue talking the way that they're talking, you're sort of colluding. I'm not blaming the victim. I'm just saying, I always, with my clients, will be like, remove yourself. Like, if it's safe to go, go. If someone is screaming at you, you know? Because then you're both spared the experience that both are going to feel bad about later if the person has a conscience, you know? So when you come back to them, the end of the 7-day thing is that you're going to see that the world doesn't stop spinning on its axis, that nobody spontaneously bursts into flame because you are not serving yourself up on every platter for every friggin' committee, for everything that needs to be done, that you're not picking up the slack. Because again, this now leads us into, well, I'm going to stop there, and then we couldn't talk about high functioning codependency after because I feel like they're directly connected.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you talk about their side of the street versus your side of the street, because that's something that it was a concept that was very frankly new to me because I was always involved in their side of the street. And that's right. That high functioning code. I'm like, what's happening over there? I can help. I can fix it. Do you need something? You know? And
you were cleaning the whole neighborhood. The
exactly.
whole neighborhood was yours.
Yeah, exactly. And so the other thing that I think that shows up, I guess if we want to make it about me, that shows up me as well, is that the over-explaining. And also when you were talking earlier about how important it is to clearly communicate your boundaries with people, my mind went like, can't they read my mind? And can I just slam a cabinet harder so they figure it out? So I came from a family that had zero confrontation, communication. Everything was really passive aggressive. And I therefore learned how to communicate like that. And so again, my wife lovingly was telling me, she's like, when you do that, that's really passive aggressive. I'm like, really? I didn't even really know what that was. So I asked her to please point out when I'm being passive aggressive because it's just so embedded in me. So it's interesting that we learn, like, why do we learn this? I mean, just copying what we see, or
well, it's modeled behavior for sure. Yeah. But think about what passive aggressive communication of anger or annoyance is. It's an indirect way of letting the other person know that you have a problem. But why it doesn't work is that it's very vague. Like, you think they understand a slammed door. They don't. They don't know. And the thing is, they can't read your mind. And they shouldn't have to. And it's okay when you're learning to say. So let's say you were changing it up with your wife and you gave her permission to tell you when you're being passive aggressive. But you can also, like, there's a part that I talk about when we're learning new behaviors and new communication behaviors around boundaries. There's this place that I call the in-between, where it's like, you used to do this when you were frustrated, slam a door, eye roll, sigh, heavy sigh, whatever,
Wash the dishes myself.
Yes, wash the dishes yourself. So she'll see them and you'll be like, yeah, that's right, I got you. Um, so there's the old behavior. And then the new behavior over here, you haven't mastered yet. So when you're in the in between, you're like, crap, I can't do the passive aggressive thing because I know too much, but I'm not exactly sure how to do the other thing. So when we're in the in between, a lot of times I just name what's happening, and then it's less threatening to name it and say, right now, I feel like being passive aggressive and ignoring you, but I'm not going to. So I'm not sure how to do it better, but I know I don't want to do that. So I'm upset about the conversation we just had. And when I'm less upset, can we talk about it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's much more direct, and it's not that that indirect communication which gets us into trouble, because that doesn't follow the rule of being very clear, communicating clearly.
Yes. And then you're enrolling your partner in being part of the solution. Because when we can tell on ourselves, sort of, like right now, my instinct is to walk on out of here and be gone for like 2 hours and not tell you where I am, because I've done that in the past, to make you worry because I want you to feel the pain that I'm in. But I really don't want to do that, because the truth is I actually want to resolve this more than I want to walk out of here for 2 hours. So can you work with me? I'm not going to do it great. I don't even know how to do it. But I know I don't want to be mad at you. I know that I love you. And I know that I want us to get better at problem solving. And I'm not helping if I leave here for 2 hours like a baby, because that's what I feel like I'm doing. Right? Being that honest. If you are in a good union, the person will most likely respond to that better than you walking out for 2 hours and making them worry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like what's coming up for me is that I'm thinking in my head, why don't people set boundaries more often? And is it just this fear of, like, can you answer? Maybe I'm not going to suppose
Sure.
what it is. Yeah, why don't people set boundaries when they need to?
There's a whole bunch of things, but fear is the number one reason. Fear of rejection, fear of humiliation, fear of being sort of kicked out of the tribe, right? When you think about, there's a visceral fear of being excommunicated from our community. When you think about back in the way olden days, cave person days, if you got kicked out of your tribe, you probably die. Like, you had to be together. And that is hardwired in us, the same as our fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, all of that. So there's real fears, and it's also child fears. So what happens is, if we have not learned to set boundaries and talk true, as I say it in the subtitle of the book, in our adult lives, then what we fear, when you think about it, it's like we have these amplified and exaggerated fears of what's going to happen if I don't do the thing the person wants me to do. Like, what's going to happen? And what you're going to find is that when you start getting better at establishing boundaries, and I always say, let's start with low priority people. Let's not do it with the most important person in our life first. Let's just start with sending the friggin' salad back if it's wrong. Yeah. Right? Let's just stop self-abandoning in everyday experiences. And you can very nicely and respectfully say, oh, hey, you know what? Actually, I ordered the salmon salad, and this is the Cobb. Can you please fix it? They're going to be like, okay, right? But so much of the time, we're taking on the feeling of the wait staff. We don't want them to get in trouble. We don't want them to be mad. We don't want them to think we're high maintenance, which is so ridiculous. But because think about it, if you get the thing you didn't order or not the way that you wanted it, it makes no sense to keep it. But a lot of times, if you're a people pleaser, you do. So we start with lower priority folks, your hairdresser, mailman, whoever, that you have something that you want to say to, that you would like to make a simple request about something. And there's ways to do it language-wise. But when you think about those fears, we have to face them. Instead of running from them and being so exhausted from the running. We just got to stop right now. Just visualize that you're just stopping and you're turning around and you're just looking at the thing that you fear. My mother used to do this thing when I was a kid where she would say, yeah, then what? Then what would happen? Then what would happen? Then what would happen? You know? Well, if I say no to going to Betty's party, then she's going to be mad. My mother's like, yeah, then what? Then she's going to talk bad about me to the other kids at school. Yeah, then what? Then, and I'm like, I don't know. And she's like, right. And then you're going to get up tomorrow and go to school. Like, you know, she would help me see that this horrible thing that I thought was going to be insurmountable and that I wasn't going to survive it. She's like, yeah. And then the sun's going to come up tomorrow and everything's going to be friggin' fine, you know? And I feel like that's the same thing with boundaries, because what I really want to instill to you and the audience is that you are not that fragile. You're really not. You're ballers. You are out there doing it in life. You are doing work of 5 people right now. Like, you're not fragile. You're going to be okay. You have to allow yourself to be uncomfortable, though. So I have this rule: when people start setting boundaries, you will instantly want to take that shit back. You will instantly want to renege. You instantly want to be like, forget it, it's fine. How much of the time do you ever tell someone that you're upset about something and they're like, okay, so I'll do the thing now. And you're like, forget it, it's fine.
All the time.
We don't even let them do it, right?
Yeah.
We literally don't even let them do it.
Yeah.
Because there's a part of us that is comfortable in this martyrdom, in this familiarity of, you know, I do everything type of a thing. Even though we're the one who's like, I got it, I got it, I got it. When someone tries to help, we're like, get out. Like, no. The hyper independence that comes along with high functioning codependency in particular,
Yeah.
because you're so capable. So you're like, I can do it all, and definitely better than you. So, but then you end up doing it all. And then we end up resentful. So I think that part of what you really want to take away from this is that A, you can learn, and B, you are not fragile. And most of your relationships are not that fragile either. And if you set a boundary in a relationship that you have, and that relationship literally goes to shit and like disappears and doesn't exist anymore, that was built, that was like a house of cards. That was built on you sacrificing yourself. And that's not the kind of relationships you want. You want relationships where there's mutuality.
Yeah.
Right? Where there's both. Where I'm filling up your bucket, you're filling up my bucket. We listen to each other. I want to talk about one other concept as well. Auto advice giving.
Oh.
So
that's why I got into a field where I can be paid to do that with my clients.
Same.
Yeah.
Literally, I'm raising my hand right now.
Yeah.
Same. So let's talk about the connection between disordered boundaries and codependency.
Yeah.
When I opened my practice and had all these people, all these CEOs, CFOs, you know, literally international pop stars, like actually, they all had the same stuff. They all had the same pain points. And they're so high functioning. But I would say to them, if I would recognize that they were talking about a codependent behavior and I would point that out, they would be like, nah, you don't know what you're talking about. Not me. I'm not dependent on squat. Everyone's dependent on me, lady. I'm making all the money. I'm making all the decisions. My family of origin counts on me. My family that I chose and created counts on me. My girlfriends, I'm the one who's always divvying up the bill and telling people what they got to pay. I'm planning the vacations together. I'm doing it all. I'm like, oh, I see. My clients don't know what codependency is. Mm-hmm. So people were very influenced by the sort of Melody Beatty, codependent no more. You have to be enabling an addict in order to be a codependent. And that's not what I saw in my practice. And that's not what I was, right? Why did I? So I created a new moniker. I literally made up high functioning codependency because I needed my clients to be able to see themselves in the codependent behavior. And as soon as I added high functioning, they were like, oh yeah, man, that's definitely me. I was like, I know. I just changed the name. It was you before as well, but okay, here we go. So what is it? So let's break down what is high functioning codependency. When you're codependent, you're overly invested in the feeling states, the outcomes, circumstances, relationships of the people in your life to the detriment of your own internal peace or your own financial, physical, emotional, spiritual well-being. Because listen, we're all lovers, right? Of course we're invested. We love our people. We want them to get what they want. So there's nothing wrong with being loving. But when we're overly invested to the point where it's if they have a crisis, it is now our crisis. There is no peace in our home or our internal self until that crisis is figured out for the friend. That's when you know that's codependency. Not love, because you're overgiving and you're overfeeling, but you're also making assumptions. So the base of codependency is disordered boundaries. Literally, the house of codependency is built, the foundation, disordered boundaries. And the thing that people don't understand at all about codependency that I think is so mind-blowing is that it is a covert or overt bid to control other people's outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And I have all the makings of this. That's why I did your codependency course. And I learned to check my urgency around this stuff, because that's
awesome.
that's how you know, right? When when you're sort of displaying this, when it's not necessarily just love and care, but you have so much urgency behind wanting to help or fix or change the other person's situation. Is that right?
That is correct. That you feel like it's your problem to fix. Mm-hmm. High-functioning codependents are endlessly auto-advice giving, insta-fixers for whatever the thing is. You have a problem, they have an answer. They have a resource. They have a person. They'll make the connection. They'll do all the things. Because your discomfort, your pain, is like intolerable for the high-functioning codependent. We just can't even stand it. And I had this experience years ago with one of my sisters was in a bad situation, living in the woods with like an abusive guy who was literally doing crack. I'm not kidding. And she had no running water. Like, it was very bad. She was an alcoholic also at the time. And I remember, she's my sister. I didn't even think I had a choice. I was like, obviously, I'm going to save her, because what else am I going to do? Leave her? Like, I have to. And I remember crying to my therapist and being like, what am I going to do? I was bawling my eyes out, for like the 10th session in a row. And she was like, Terri, when you say, what are you going to do? What do you mean? I'm like, well, I can't leave her in that place with what she's doing. And I'd done tons of stuff, throwing money at I tried all the things to get her out. And she was like, I'm going to ask you a question. What makes you think you know what your sister needs to learn in this lifetime? And I was like, well, I think we can all agree she doesn't need to do it with a crackhead in the woods. And she's like, I cannot agree, because I'm not God, and I have no idea the way her lessons are going to come, and you don't either. And I'm like, so what are you saying, Bev? You're saying I'm just going to leave her there? She's like, Terri, you need boundaries. Do you know what's really happening for you and why you have such an urgency to save your sister? And I'm like, I'm a good sister and I love her and I'm Mother Teresa. I mean, isn't that what's going on right now? And she was like, no. What's going on right now is that you've worked for 20 years in therapy to create a pretty harmonious life. Your sister's dumpster fire of a life is really messing with your peace, and you really want it to stop. So it's your pain that you want to stop, which, also changed my view of myself as being like, I'm just a lover like that, where I realized, wow, it really is control, and it's not my decision to make. And so she walked me through. So I set a boundary with my sister and said, hey, this is too painful while you're in this situation to still talk to you. You telling me all the crappy stuff this guy's doing, I can't deal. But if you ever want to get out, like for real, I will always be your person. And so maybe we talked like twice in 9 months. And then she called me and she was like, does your offer still stand? And I was like, I'm literally getting in my car right now to come get you. And, I helped her appropriately. Right? Mm-hmm. My husband and I had this little lake house. We winterized it so she could live there for free for 2 years, get on her feet. She went back to school. She got in recovery. But here's the thing. She got to be the hero of her own story, not me. Like when we auto-fix, we are centering that other person's issue on us as the solution. I'm here now. Everything is going to be okay. I'm going to figure it out for you. And it's so presumptuous, and it's so not helpful, and it's so degrading to the other person. Even if they're asking you to do it, it's not the right thing to do, because they must be self-determined. And that was many years ago, I mean, decades ago, with my sister, and she's great. But she got the self-esteem. And then I was like, I believed in her that she could do it, instead of me being like, I have to jump in because I think you're a loser, which is basically the subtext of what we're doing, whether we mean to or not. So that was a rude awakening, dude. Whew.
Yeah. What a great story to highlight. I'm glad your sister is doing so much better, but what a great story to highlight how that can show up with that, the wanting to save people and just having it feel, oh yeah, it is actually really uncomfortable for me, and owning that we can't control it. So one of the things that you talk about a lot, and I think this was in a recent post you did, and I see this plaguing myself and others, my students and my clients in my coaching programs, that perfectionism can really show up and start to derail us or sabotage us, and especially in context with, eating a healthy lifestyle. What tends to show up is, oh, I ate the thing, now I'm just going to eat everything in sight, or right. And how it potentially ties into self-sabotaging behaviors. I'm not sure if those things sort of relate, but can you kind of unravel some of this for us?
Sure. Let's juxtaposition perfectionism with striving for excellence, because these are different things. Because perfectionism is an impossibility. There is no perfect. Life isn't perfect. Life is messy. Relationships are messy. Boundaries are messy. It's all friggin' messy and beautiful and wonderful and awful all at the same time. That's called being in life school, right? That's life.
As an Enneagram 1, I lament to say that I agree with you. This is hard for me to accept, but it is true.
Yes. Because with perfectionism, this is really a disorder that starts for many of us in childhood, either being in a situation where it was too chaotic, and so the thing we could control was ourselves. We could strive to be perfect. We could get perfect grades. We could be the perfect gymnast. We could do all of these things to sort of not deal with, to try to counterbalance what was or wasn't happening at home. You could also, maybe you had a very authoritarian home. I mean, perfectionism can be caused by lots of different things in childhood, but you have it if, let's say you give a big talk somewhere. It's amazing and everything is great, but like one little teeny thing didn't go exactly as you wanted it to. And people are like, oh my God, that was amazing. And you're like, it was great up until that end part where I flubbed that little thing, but I mean, it's fine. But like, we feel compelled to say it, and it's really bothering us. So the 99% that was amazing about what you did, that joy gets like usurped into the 1% that didn't go exactly as you imagined or planned. Perfectionism, it's not just that we expect ourselves to be perfect. Then we can also put this on others. So what does perfectionism actually look like? It looks like having impossibly high standards. It looks like doing a paper, a job, whatever it is that you're doing in life, and doing it like 6 times. So over and over and over, going back to it. It could be better. It could be better. Which all of that takes the joy out of everything that we do. And then having super high standards, too high, for the people in our lives. So then we're always pointing out what our partner is doing wrong and how they could do it better, and it doesn't make sense and it's not efficient and la la la. I remember my mother saying to me, because I'm definitely a recovering perfectionist, and when I was first dating my husband, he lived in Jersey and I was living in Manhattan at the time, and he would want to drive into the city to scoop me up, he would say, and drive me back to be with him for the night. Like, he didn't care, even though he's like driving like Oliver Hill's Half Acre just to pick me up when I could just have gone to Penn Station taking a 20-minute train. So I was telling my mother this. I'm like, it's like so nice of him, but I don't really get it. It just doesn't make sense. It's not efficient. Like, it's so much more time efficient right? And my mother said,
yeah, I think that's in us also as like New Yorkers, New Jerseyans.
Yeah, we're like, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And my mother said, Terri, why are you stopping him from doing nice things for you. He wants to come pick you up. And why don't you just receive and allow him to do it? Because if you keep saying no, the offers will stop coming. And if you need everything done your way, then you will end up like me, doing it all by yourself. I was like, damn, that is some words of wisdom, Janie Cole. Thank you. And I stopped blocking him from doing nice things for me from that day forward. But the perfectionism can get in the way. It's too pragmatic. It's too like, it has to make sense, and it doesn't. So how can you strive for excellence instead of torturing yourself and being in the prison of perfectionism? Is allow for your humanness. Allow for other people's humanness. Really get it. Life is messy. And this deep drive to control things is about something else. So it's really not about the perfect presentation or the perfect job or the perfect wedding or whatever the hell it is that you're trying to make perfect. There is a wound that has nothing to do with perfectionism that I promise you needs your attention from childhood. Like something that you just have to try to track, like when did it start that you were excelling and feeling like excelling was your only way to breathe in life? Like when did that happen? What was going on in your home? And just really dial into that little kid inside of you of like, what did she need that she didn't get? Because you could probably give her a lot of that now, and you'll start to see some of these perfectionistic tendencies abate. But here's the thing. You have to want to change this pattern. You have to accept that life is messy and that life is beautiful and delicious in its messiness, and that's okay. Like, let yourself off the hook. If you've got compulsive things where like the kitchen has to be perfect before you go to bed every night, you know what? One night, leave the fucking dishes. It's okay. You can do them in the morning. Start stretching out of the rigid box that is perfectionism, and you'll realize the world isn't gonna fall apart, but you might have feelings, and those are what I want you to pay attention to.
Could the rigidness around this perfectionism stuff also be these rigid boundaries as well? And like, and also not allowing other people to help because they're not going to do it as well. And are those things also related?
Absolutely. And I find that a lot of my clients with perfectionistic tendencies do have rigid boundaries.
Yeah.
And really don't like to accept help and are very much like grudge holders, punishers.
Yeah.
They will cut you off. They will not get back to you just to torture you because they're mad about something, but they won't tell you why. My way or the highway is what the rigid boundary says.
Yeah.
So if you go to the boundaryquiz.com, that would be like the ice queen, or the loner would be like that. Like the loner just can't deal with messy relationships, but has rigid boundaries because they use separation. It's like someone who's anxiously attached, so they avoid attachments. Or if there's conflict, they're like, I'm out of here. And you won't hear, they'll just ghost for like 2 weeks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting what people find out about their own boundary archetype.
Yeah, I'll definitely link that in the show notes. So we're coming up on the end here, and I did want to ask you something more related to specifically to nutrition. A lot of people, as they are, embarking on a new lifestyle, they're trying on a new therapeutic diet to improve their metabolic health and their blood sugar and things. This often involves, getting rid of sweet foods and junk foods and things like that, having to throw things out, or that their husband is sitting on the couch eating ice cream and it's hard for them to look at. So how, or all the friends are going out to eat and come on, just have one French fry, there's people, when we start changing things, other people are not always on the same page, and then they could have their own stuff come up about what you're doing and how it's reflecting on them. So how, I know this is like a way more than a couple minute answer, but how can people begin to sort of assert that they they're maybe looking for support in this area, and just sort of bridge these conversations with people, or know when they even need to say something at all?
Well, I think you have to be proactive. Like, so much of what I teach is proactive boundaries, because if we're waiting for people to get it right, they're not going to. So why don't we give them a chance to actually get it right by telling them what we need and what we want? So with friends, you can say, hey, I'm doing this thing. I'm cleaning up my diet. I don't expect you to, but I would love your support in doing it. If they say, we're going out to dinner to like a Mexican place where you know it's not going to be the food that you're going to be able to eat or that you want to eat, you can say, all right, I'll meet up with you guys after. You cannot go. Or I would certainly, at the very least, expect my friends to support me in not drinking the sugary margarita or whatever. But you have to ask that ahead of time. Just say, hey, you guys, heads up. You can do it in a group text. Hey, I'm cleaning up my diet. I would love your support. So when we're together, please don't tempt me, because I'm temptable. Like, we can use humor, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to have one person. I always find the one person who is like always really has my back in a group, right? Because I have to have the same friend since literally 19, not kidding, 68. Okay. I was only 4, but still. And so you have your one person where you're like, hey, this might be hard for me tonight. Can you please support me in remind me why I'm doing it? Just let's have a secret code. Like, just squish my leg. Remind me that it's worth it, that I'm going to feel better, that I'm going to be proud, that I can go out and stick to what I'm doing for myself. And those are internal boundaries. This whole thing around food and health and ourselves and self-care, those are internal boundaries. Like, being able to just see the big picture and go, I really want to be healthy. I really want to stick to this thing that I've committed to, because for me, I want to do it. It's not about my friend wanting me to have a margarita with her. It's about, what do I want for myself, and expecting that others will tell you that this is important. You have to think it's important, and then other people will think it's important. So the two more things I want to say about this. One is that maybe the most important takeaway is that what you think, how you feel, and what you want has to be the most important thing to you. And it has to be more important than what anyone else thinks, feels, or wants. And that doesn't mean we don't compromise in marriages and partnerships and with friends. It's that we can't self-abandon. You have to know that how you want to treat your body, that's important. And then let the people who love you know that it's important, and their support is important to you. But so much of the time, even when I say that to people, what you think, how you feel, and what you want has to be the most important thing to you. You have to think it's more important than what anybody else wants, thinks, or feels. They'll be like, isn't that selfish? Isn't that mean? Isn't that narcissistic? I'm like, no, that's healthy, because we can always choose, and we do, to compromise in relationships, right? We can choose to compromise, but you can't be prioritizing other people's wants, needs, thoughts, desires, preferences above yourself all the time and expect that you're going to feel satisfied in your relationships. You're not. You're going to be resentful because it feels like no one else gives a crap. But here's the thing. You're the original person who's not giving a crap about how you feel, what you think, and what you want. And we want others to uphold it for us even when we don't. And it's not their job, right? It's your job to be like, hey, I friggin' matter in my relationships and in the world. And then go about having that be the energy that you bring everywhere, because you do matter. What you think does matter. What you want does matter, because you matter,
What a lovely way to wrap this up, because I think that is such a great take-home message, and I hope that that everyone listening is realizing that what they think, feel, and care about does matter, and that to get in touch with that is so important, so then you can directly communicate it to other people and stop expecting that people read our minds and feeling like you're in this all by yourself, because you don't have to be. And there's people around you that love you, and they want to know what's happening inside your head. They want to know who you truly are. And your work, Terri, can really help us bridge this gap. And so can you tell us, I know you have a program coming out, and then when this launches, there's a 3-part video series. So can you tell us all about that? And I'll make sure to link to all of it in the show notes.
Sure. I'm actually doing a 3-part live training. It's free. So people can find that at terricole.com/free training. Super simple. Where I'm going to go live an hour a day, 16, 17, 18 of May. And people can get, if they get this after the fact, they can get I think we're going to have them up for like 10 days. So you guys can get the recordings, no problem. Where I'm really going to be just hitting the deepest stuff that I get. People email me all the time what their biggest boundary conundrums are. And that's basically what I'm going to be teaching about. And I am going to be talking about internal boundaries, which really does directly, Danielle, relate to what you do in your life. Yeah. And then on the 24th of May starts my next boundary boot camp, which is a signature course. It's 8 weeks. And I'm doing it live. So I don't always do it live, but I am doing it live this time, meaning that the Q&As weekly will be with me. It's without a doubt the most transformational course. I mean, I've got a lot of great courses, but this one I've been teaching for about 8 years, and every single year we take the feedback from the students and make the course better and better. So it is amazing, if I say so myself. So if you could use help with boundaries, go to terricole.com/boundary bootcamp.
Awesome.
And you will find all the things that you need.
Okay, perfect. And we have your book and your podcast, everything linked. You have episodes twice a week. They're amazing. My wife and I are avid listeners of your podcast. Oh, and yeah, and your program's amazing. I do also my signature program. It's also 8 weeks long. And it's just the transformations you get when you're in there with people, coaching them live. It's so lovely. And I love to, like you said, take the feedback and keep improving. So I can't imagine after 8 years how great this program is. So if you are like me and wanting to hear, just like not stop listening to hearing you speak, because everything just makes so much sense and it makes your life make sense. Check out Terri's information in the show notes. And thank you, Terri, so much for your time and for being here today.
Thank you, Danielle. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, my pleasure.